So I've been trying to get into Roaring River for, I don't know, 18 years. And every time we approached the Park Service, they were against it, you know. They had some divers who had been in there, and they really weren't up to it. But there's a gentleman named Ben Miller who was doing some dye tracing in the area, and they traced some of the water from some sinkholes into into Roaring River here. And he talked to the Park Service and said, "Hey, I know some guys that can actually go down and get through the restriction, and if you're interested." And Joel, I'm not sure how long Joel's been superintendent here, but he was all for it. And so he did a lot of the permit process for us and got us access here. Well, the map shows this restriction there, and you get all these stories all the time about what's there, and we took a weight and we dropped in all this crap, and it's never true. And so we were a bit skeptical of what was there, but we went in initially and we found some dive line, and we started following it, and it zigzagged all over the place in there. And we made it down to the restriction, but it was flowing a lot of water. And so we weren't able to go through because of the massive amount of water going through. So the first couple of trips here, we worked on surveying the upper area and found a shorter path to get to the restriction down there. And got gold line laid and did a lot of the setup work for whenever the flow rate came down, we'd be able to get through. Well, the previous people that had attempted to get through were doing it in the conventional cave diving methods of the time, which was back mount steel tanks with stage bottles, because open circuit you had to have a lot of gas at that depth. And so we're approaching it with rebreathers and side mount rebreathers at that. And so even though the restriction is small, it's pretty big for us, and we're able to actually go through.
First time I got to the hole, I wasn't sure how Mike got through the one he got through, because it was really small, the one that Mike initially got through. And then we had noticed there was a piece of trash in one of the other holes, and we were able to move that, and that's not quite so bad, but it's still pretty small.
So the previous trip, I actually got through the restriction with small tanks on, and the flow rate was down to around 50 cubic feet per second, and I was able to pull my way through. And there's quite a big room down there, but my big concern on that trip was the way the restrictions the openings are positioned. I was afraid of getting sucked out of the larger one into the smaller one and getting pushed through. So my big concern on that dive was being able to come back out safely without getting sucked downstream and ground up. And once I did that, I was pretty excited, and we were going to go do some exploration the next day. But that night we got 2 inches of rain, and the flow rate was 120 cubic feet per second the next day, and there was no access then. So yeah, yesterday we went in, and it was massive. It's like scary big. And the problem for me is nothing in there. It's all real soft clay, and it's just brittle and just falls, And when you start getting into a big room, you start thinking, well, what's holding the ceiling up, I'd much rather have small tunnels. I feel so much better in a small tunnel. But yeah, so there's really massive, big room there, and up in the top of the room, there's more of a crack that was going along the ceiling. And we followed that crack for a ways, and it actually started opening up quite large. And we found a place to tie off to. And so today when we went in, since there was no good tie-off places for safety bottles, we were going to set a float on the ceiling. So today I went in and I started trying to set a float to the ceiling, and I never could find the ceiling. So today we found this borehole going straight up, and we went up it until we hit our turn time, and so we had to make our exit. So after I made the tie and John started surveying, I went up about 20 feet higher, and I was blowing bubbles, and they were just going completely out of sight, 30 feet or so above me. So it goes up to at least 100 feet. So we'll have to find out. I think the max depth in there that we've been to is, so tomorrow we're going to do a couple things because there was still going passage at 250. So we're going to look at that passage, and we're going to go and run that line on up to probably around 100, and just check what's up there. Yeah, well, we have to go deeper too. So while we're at it, a couple people have mixes that are good for 300 and 350 foot. And so we're going to drop on down to that level. And if we still don't have the bottom, we're going to drop a weight and see if we can see how much further it is. So the Park Service is wanting a couple things from this. They want the exploration and the map, for one thing. They want to know where the water's coming from. You know, realistically, we're not going to tell them where it's coming from because we're not going to be able to explore that far. Personally, I believe that this spring is tied into the Springfield Plateau, which is a big aquifer in central Missouri. And actually, if we can find a specific cave fish here that is only in the Springfield Plateau, we'll have definitive proof that we're tied into that spring system. But they're interested in the map. And they also want us to shoot a documentary that they can show at their visitor center to document the exploration. The documentary is being produced by T.L. Bass Productions, and he's done several underwater documentaries for us. And so the Park Service is quite happy with his work, and well, this exploration wouldn't even be possible if it wasn't for side mount rebreathers, and the fact that we can go through such a small opening on a rebreather and maximizing our gas. If you were having to try to do this on open circuit, the amount of tanks you'd have to take down there would be just phenomenal. It'd be a real difficult exploration.
To add to that, the beauty thing about the rebreathers is we're able to do a couple of setup dives and take a bunch of gas down there that'll stay down there for the entire rest of our trip, and then we don't have to keep doing those setup dives over and over again like you would if you're on open circuit. You know, so then because of the rebreather, we're able to take smaller tanks in general, and then we've got all of the contingency gases already saved along the way.
So rebreathers is where you take your exhale breath and you recirculate it and you scrub the CO2 out of it, and you meter the amount of oxygen that you need, and you supplement that amount of oxygen. So you're just completely recycling the gas. So it's 100% efficient. The only thing that is consumed is the little bit of oxygen. And a small oxygen tank like this can last you 10 hours. So whereas a large open circuit scuba tank will only last you, well, at that depth, it would only last you about 15 minutes. We're really running, to put it in perspective, the average recreational diver's limit is 130 feet, and we're working at twice that, and we're actually working. You know, I mean, we're doing really hard dives at twice that depth. Well, there's the Missouri State Park System is very limited on what they'll allow, and a lot of that is the Department of Natural Resources want to protect the environment, and they want to protect their natural resources. So if by doing this, we may be able to show them that we can protect that, and we can also educate people. And that might allow us access to other locations that are completely unknown and unexplored.
To put our dives today in maybe a little bit more perspective for people who aren't technical divers, a typical recreational dive, if you dive down to 130 feet, for example, and don't get into decompression, at most you're going to have a 5-minute stop at 10 to 20 feet. Just to off-gas a little bit if you need to. Now, if an issue came up and you had to immediately surface, you would really be in no danger if you did blow off that safety stop. The dives that we're doing for a 35-minute or 30 to 35-minute bottom time, we wound up with 94 total minutes of stops on the way up. And if something were to happen and we were to surface early, we would be in a lot of trouble.
Well, it'd be like shaking a soda up and opening it. That's what would happen to the blood.
Yeah, exactly.
So it takes a full team in order to get the exploration divers into place. The team starts with the surface manager. He has to manage all of the divers and keep track of their times and schedules and things. And working hand in hand with the surface manager is the safety divers. And the safety divers' responsibility is safety. And as the exploration divers are coming out, they go and check on them, and then they take them supplies that are needed. The safety divers put the safety tanks in for them, things like that. So it takes a full team to make something happen. So swallows can't carry coconuts. The power to weight ratio is vastly off.